This video contains subject matter that may be offensive and disturbing to some people. If you are the type to require a warning throughout a video or show, let this message serve as your warning. This channel discusses the harsh reality of true crime. If this warning is not sufficient for you, consider a different genre and unsubscribe from my channel immediately. Explain to us what a chimera is, because I guess they exist.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah.
Those are people with two DNAs in their bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, woo.
Good to be a criminal if you're a chimera, right?
In fact, I was going to say my favorite one is this serial killer in Russia. His name was Andrei Chikatilo, and he was a chimera, and he got away with murder for 10 years because the DNA at the scene of the crime, the semen left, wasn't anything like the DNA that they took from him, the blood at the police station. So they said it can't be him. They kept saying it's got to be him. No, it can't be him. The DNA doesn't match, but it has to be him. So for some reason, I forgot what happened. They maybe took saliva the next time or something matched, and it turned out he had two DNAs in his body.
Wow. Did he know that? God. He was like, you got me. Holy,
yeah,
what do you mean that's not mine? That's what he was saying, right? What do you mean that's not my semen, he was thinking.
Yeah.
And then
he didn't catch me, so.
God, he must have just been absolutely
well, in those days, this was in the 80s, probably the 90s, he didn't know a lot about DNA. He didn't know. I mean, this was the police learning about DNA and knowing that if it didn't match, it wasn't him, but it was.
But nowadays, if that same guy was now and he was exonerated, and they said, well, we tested the DNA in the semen and we tested you, and they're completely two different people. It
depends, because it could come out looking like a mixture. And they tried that once. They tried to trick the DNA analyst by sending in a chimera in, and seeing if the DNA analyst would say, look, it's a mixture. I can't deal with it.
That's crazy.
There was an article in the New York Times. There was a guy that gave a lecture talk at one of the big DNA conferences called Issue, and he had just had a bone marrow transplant, and they were tracking, what DNA was in his body, whether it was the new DNA from the bone marrow transplant or the old one. And if I remember right, his saliva, his DNA kept coming and going. It would come back, and then it disappeared a certain amount. That's
just weird. So how does it happen?
Well, they think that it's because somebody's conceived as a twin, and the twins merge into one person. One twin is absorbed.
Oh, like for fraternal twins that absorb. So almost the exact opposite of identical twins. It's one, and then they split off. Except those are two identical.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, they think it happens with identical twins, but you'll never know.
Oh God, that's creepy.
So some people, occasionally somebody's born with this lump or something, and they find out it's the twin that would have been born, stuff like that. But it's the merger of these. It must
be like right away, almost like they're just.
I would say there's not a big window for that, but it must happen. And that there was a woman recently. This is cool. She was she had welfare for her children, and they didn't believe her, so she took a DNA test to prove it, and her children didn't match her. So she was going to be, accused of welfare fraud. She kept saying, "Look, they're all my children. This is my husband, right?" So it turned out she was pregnant, and when she went to the hospital, they had the police with her in the delivery room and everything. She delivered the child. They were right there. They witnessed it. And the DNA in the baby did not match her.
Oh man!
And they were going, yeah, that's what they said. Oh man, she was a chimera, and she had two DNAs in her body, and she was passing the other DNA of her. Oh wait, can I tell you my favorite story?
Yeah.
Oh,
keep on going. Everyone's gonna love the chimera stuff.
No, this is my favorite story. This couple went to a fertility clinic. to conceive a child. So they conceived this beautiful child, looked great, nothing wrong, had the baby tested, everything's fine. Except there's one thing very strange about the baby, and that is at the first test they did, the baby did not share any DNA with the father. The couple went back to the fertility clinic with their attorney and tried to explain how upset they were. Well, they did another test and they found out that the baby shared 25% of its DNA with the dad, the second test. And the only way they could figure out this worked was that the dad was a chimera and that he was conceived as a twin and that he absorbed his fraternal twin and that the sperm that went into fertilizing that egg to make that baby was his brother's DNA, so that he was really the uncle of the baby that he had conceived with his wife through the fertility clinic.
See, I actually understood that. That's the
well,
that's the scary part.
I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you.
That's the scary part. I mean, just that the whole concept of chimera is absolutely crazy. They don't feel any differently than anybody else, right?
Not that I know of. I mean, it's not like they get headaches on Thursdays, you know.
Well, I wonder, you know, does it ever happen? Has there ever been a chimera that turns out to be a conjoined twin? Wouldn't that be weird? They're so rare that the odds are probably so low, right? Like,
yeah, because conjoined twins, I mean, they're super rare.
Right. So, and then, but just imagine if because you could literally have two completely different looking people on a conjoined, what would have been a chimera, but I don't know how to say it. Let's say they merged a little bit later, and then they sort of developed. I don't know. I don't know if that would ever.
Yeah, well, you know what? It'd be a little bit tough because
the
usually those conjoined twins are identical twins, right?
Yeah, and they just
so that you're dealing with chimeras, you can't really detect the identical twin part of the chimera, right? Chimerism, because if it's an identical twin and they merge, you're never going to see it. It's got to be fraternal when they merge, and then you can start telling. And I don't know if that really happens with conjoined twins. If two twins are floating around in there and they say, hey, let's get, and they get stuck.
And I think that there would be rejection issues somehow, too, because they wouldn't be.
Right. I think the conjoined twins start like this, and they start separating, and they never let go. Whereas this is like two that are separate, and they kind of on top of, So I think it's the opposite direction.
I'd like to just physically see. I mean, it would be cool is if somebody intentionally started off making a chimera, but then just to see what the hell happened. Nobody even knows how to do it artificially, right?
No, I mean, and why would you want to mess with it? Why would
you just like with mice,
Well, you do create chimeras when you give bone marrow transplants.
No, I've heard somebody say that somehow then your DNA can be, that's another crime story then, right?
Yeah, it is. And that was, like I said, the guy with the bone marrow transplant, they did a study on him. They took his DNA from his lips, his mouth, his semen, his hair, his blood, and they monitored how much of him kept coming back. I mean, you can't get rid of all your DNA, right? So, over time, sometimes more of his DNA would be there. I think the DNA in his hair never changed.
So why does it happen? Why does it happen during a bone marrow transplant and not maybe a blood transfusion?
Because I think the blood kind of gets flushed out and redoes itself, whereas the bone marrow is the source of your DNA in your body. It's like the factory, to my understanding. So, you really, you probably never get rid of entirely all your DNA. It's still in there, so you just replace it with somebody else's bone marrow, which carries their DNA. So,
God, it just seems like there's so many weird sort of ramifications. So when you get bone marrow transplants, does some of the, since you're changing your DNA, can it alter your look in some way?
Oh, that's interesting. I really don't know. I think that this is the edge of what I understand. That you're replacing stem cells and stuff. So that's a good question. How come your hair doesn't turn blonde or something? You must have, a certain amount of DNA of your own otherwise kind of in your body, and it's never entirely replaced. I don't know. I would say your blood type would change.
Maybe there's some things that, once it's set, right? And then even putting DNA in your body isn't going to change.
I think, I think what it probably is that part of your body that renews itself quickly, like your blood, your bone marrow, your saliva, that kind of thing. That probably is more volatile, and you change that out. Whereas, like my skin cells that divide and stuff, they're still me. There's so many of them that you're never going to change all of that.
That's weird, because in the future we're going to probably develop technology where you can be almost like an amphibian, where you lose an arm and it grows back. Now, what if you just had a bone marrow transplant? In that instance, that arm might come back a little bit with like the other person, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying. Another sci-fi story. You have a lot of listeners. Hey, listeners, here's your idea for your New York Times bestseller, by the way.
But you got to admit, that is pretty crazy, right? Some of that stuff.
I tell you, there's probably all kinds of, like the guy in the fertility clinic being his own uncle of his baby. You're going to see a lot of weird stuff, I bet.
I don't think, like if you were sitting in a bar and telling that story, nobody would believe it.
Yeah, I mean, normally you have DNA and something goes wrong and the child dies, or there's a mutation, you get a disease, or you have diabetes, so you have some kind of other deal going on. You have Down syndrome or something. If the organism dies or is very affected. These ones with the chimera, that's just benign. It just happens, and you survive and you don't even know it.
Yeah, it seems so weird to me that you could merge two completely different DNA beginnings, I guess, however you want to say it, and then but you don't notice it at all. It just seems bizarre to me.
It is another one. I know about a pair of twins up in British Columbia, and they were identical twins, right? They tested, what was it? Wow. They tested the DNA in their skin or something. And they were identical, no problem. And one of them, when they were about 7 or 8 years old, one of them developed cystic fibrosis, and it's a genetic disease, and the other one didn't. So what was going on, right? They didn't know. So, okay.
I was already thinking this ahead of you when you were.
One of the twins. The way you test for cystic fibrosis is you take like the salt from your skin. You see it's got like a lot of copper chloride in your skin. That's the diagnosis. And when they did that, they snagged some skin cells. Oh, I know what it was. They had done blood tests and they were identical twins. So when they scraped the skin, they got some skin cells from the sick child and the well child. They compared the DNA from the skin and they found out they were not identical. So what they figured out was when the children were conceived, they were next to one another in the womb, and the sick child commandeered the blood supply of the healthy child. And so when they were born, one child was fine. She was exactly what you thought, but the other child was a chimera because she was actually a fraternal twin that had taken over the blood supply, her own blood supply from her healthy sister. So she had two DNAs.
Right. That's what I knew. I knew you were going there. Well, the weird part is that means that there was going to be, had that not occurred, there would have been triplets, but two would have been identical, and there would have been one just fraternal twin, right?
No, there'd be two kids. There'd just be fraternal twins.
Yeah, but but the third, the chimera one, had that not been squished, because you said that. Let's see.
No, there was only two. No.
Okay,
two.
okay.
Here, they're two, and they're fraternal. No problem.
Okay.
This one's sick. This one's well.
Oh, I see what you're saying. They were fraternal.
The sick one they were snuggled up against each other, and this one says, "Hey, give me some blood."
I get what you're saying. They thought they were identical because some tests would show that. But
the blood was the same.
Yeah.
The blood test showed them, okay, they're identical twins. What else?
Well, how about that?
Oh, wait a minute.
That scenario that I just said will happen at some point, where you'll have two identical twins.
Yeah.
And then it'll be the same scenario where if you had two fraternal twins. However, sometimes one of those fraternal twins will separate. But what if at that time if it was quick enough that one of the identical merged with the fraternal twin, then you'd have literally
got it.
which is kind of similar.
So they're like half identical, half fraternal,
yeah,
depending on what you look at. Yeah.
But for just a brief moment, they were identical, and then boom, the one.
Yeah,
but it would end up being similar, actually, to what you just said.
Yeah. So you know, you never. I mean, we're going to come across all these weird DNA stories sooner or later.